So why does telling the truth get you kicked out of the Liberal Party?
What message is the Prime Minister sending to Canadians, particularly to young women, when he kicks out former cabinet ministers just for doing the right thing?
We have 18 strong women members of cabinet who lead every day on the big issues that matter to Canadians.
Today was the federal government's first day without Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott in their ranks, and the Prime Minister and his MPs spent the day defending the decision to remove them from caucus. Today, Wilson-Raybould and Philpott had this to say about their ouster.
I am, to put it lightly, disappointed. And I would say that if you stand up for what you believe is right and you hold strong to your principles, the truth and principles must always come first, and that's what I did, and that's what I'll continue to do.
It's very unfortunate that it's come to this, but we have to make difficult choices in politics, and we aren't always in control of all of the things that will happen and happen to yourself when you're in politics, but you have to be able to hold your head high and look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and say that the choices that you made were the best ones under the circumstances.
In the House of Commons, the opposition attacked the Prime Minister's feminist and reconciliation agendas, saying this contradicts those policies. How are Liberal MPs explaining the decision then? Maryam Monsef is the Minister of International Development and of Women and Gender Equality. She joins me from the foyer of the House of Commons. Hi, Minister. Great to see you. Thanks you for your time.
Hi, Vashti. I'm happy to be here.
Minister Monsef, why were Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott kicked out of caucus?
Well, the Prime Minister made the difficult decision that he did yesterday because it became clear that our former colleagues no longer had trust in the team. And it became clear, too, that the team had lost confidence and trust in them. And I support the Prime Minister's decision, as we all do, recognizing that the work that we were sent here to do requires a strong team to stay focused on Canadians. And that's what we'll continue to do to make sure that we deliver and continue to deliver on growing the middle class, to helping the people who are working hard to join it. And that's exactly what we're going to do.
Minister, the Prime Minister in his speech when he was describing the expulsion of Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott made specific reference to the recording and subsequent breakdown of trust that followed it, that telephone recording. Why was Jane Philpott kicked out if that is the case?
Well, I would refer that question specifically to the Prime Minister, but at the end of the day, it became clear that neither of our former colleagues had trust in the team. And
I just have to interrupt for a second. Why is that clear with Dr. Philpott? She specifically said she had confidence in the Prime Minister and the team on everything other than this one issue.
My honourable colleague Jane Philpott made a world of difference sitting around the cabinet table, and she made the choice to leave that seat, and she will be missed. That said, we have come to this place to work as a team, to work on issues that matter to Canadians, to have really difficult conversations inside the tent, to make sure that we come to the best decision possible on behalf of the people who get us here. And those difficult conversations and those diverse opinions can only happen when we're working together in a trusting and respectful environment where we air those out. And it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but our job remains staying focused on Canadians. Over half of the boiled water advisories, for example, have been lifted. We have more work to do, and we will ensure that we lift them all in the next 2 years.
Those advisories, though, for example, are something that Jane Philpott worked on very specifically. I just want to be clear, because you're saying that there was a breakdown in trust, that it was her decision to leave the cabinet table. She was clear. She said on this specific issue, she didn't have confidence, but on everything else she did, and she agreed with the direction that your party was moving in. So I'm just wondering, is the message that you cannot dissent on one topic? What is the message sent?
So the decision was made by the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister alone, and I support that decision 100%. The work that Jane Philpott did to advance reconciliation is commendable, and Canada is proud of that work. Dr. Carolyn Bennett, the minister responsible for Crown and Indigenous relations, also plays a significant role in all of that. And every single one of us cabinet ministers in our mandate letter have been given clear direction by the Prime Minister to be active agents for reconciliation in government. And as the Prime Minister said, all of these efforts are much bigger than any individual. They require a whole of government approach, and that whole of government approach requires a strong team that is united by the values that we have come to this place with, that is united in our confidence in the Prime Minister and our government. And the only way that we can continue to move ahead is by focusing on Canadians and not ourselves.
The Prime Minister called the recording that Jody Wilson-Raybould made of the conversation between herself and Michael Wernick unconscionable. Jody Wilson-Raybould told reporters today that what was unconscionable, was to, quote, tread over the independence of the prosecutor, that it's, quote, unconscionable not to uphold the rule of law. Does she have a point? Are you and your colleagues focused on the wrong thing?
We are all here to uphold the rule of law, and we are all here to protect Canadians' jobs, and we all agree that the decision around a DPA is the decision of the Attorney General and the Attorney Generals alone. That said, in places like Parliament, there has to be room for diversity of perspectives. The Daughters of the Vote were here today, and they were coming here with a lot of great ideas and diverse perspectives from all walks of life, and they were here talking about those issues that they care about, and they didn't always agree. They had significant time with the Prime Minister during a question period with him, and they were able to ask those questions in a respectful way. And if we're going to advance reconciliation, if we're going to do more by the First Peoples of this land, to grow the economy, to address climate change, we need to have courageous conversations. It doesn't mean we will always agree, but we need to be able to have courageous conversations, listen to diverse perspectives, but also ensure that there's trust, because without trust, the team that needs to move this forward is not as strong as it can be. Today, our team is stronger than ever, and we will remain focused on what Canadians sent us here to do.
But her point is that the team's outrage is misplaced, that it's focused on the recording when it should be focused on the problems that she raised in it. Does Jody Wilson-Raybould have a point there?
The team feels that the trust that binds the team together has been broken. And the Prime Minister made the very difficult decision that he did after significant consideration and a lot of work to try and find common ground. He made the decision to make sure that we are able to continue to work together as a team. And when there wasn't an opportunity to find that common ground, he had to make that difficult decision, and it's the right decision. So we will continue to stay focused on the work that Canadians have sent us here to do. My job is to focus on ensuring that we advance gender equality, that we continue to create conditions for people of all genders and backgrounds to prosper here in Canada and around the world. And I will continue to do that. And I have the support of a Prime Minister who's giving me a long runway to do everything I can to make sure that we continue delivering on a plan that's seeing more women working now than ever before, more Indigenous people have jobs now than ever before, more young people, more newcomer, more persons with disabilities. We have a plan that is working, and we owe it to people who sent us here to keep focused on that plan.
Do you understand, Minister, though, how some Canadians view what just happened as a powerful man sort of punishing two high-profile female MPs for speaking out? Are you sympathetic to that view?
I would say that that is an easy narrative. Our record on advancing gender equality speaks for itself. The Prime Minister chose to surround himself with colleagues and candidates from across the country who come with a lot of strength. Yes, there are strong women in our cabinet, and I'm so privileged to be part of that work, but there are strong women in our caucus, and we'll continue to do the work that we've been. We were the ones to put forward the difficult but required inquiry into what happened to our stolen sisters. We put forward proactive pay equity legislation. We put forward a national housing strategy that has a carve-out specifically for women so that they don't have to stay in abusive relationships because they don't have housing.
But does that mean the optics of what just happened don't matter?
This is a decision for Canadians to make, and our focus will continue to be on implementing a plan that is seeing gender equality as the right thing to do, but also as a driver for economic growth. Look, Vashti, the fact that we're even having a conversation about a feminist prime minister, about gender equality and feminism in the government of Canada, that is a sign of the real change and progress that we have achieved together over the past 3.5 years. That is something that we can all be proud of.
Is that the bar Canadians should be judging this by? Just that the fact that we're okay to have a discussion about a feminist prime minister, or should they still be scrutinizing how the veracity of that claim?
We as a country are strongest when we hold all of us to high standards. The fact that we're here is because a feminist movement advocated for leaders to see gender equality as the right thing to do and as the smart thing to do. And as the Prime Minister says, better is always possible. And we're going to continue to work hard for Canadians to advance gender equality because it's the right thing to do. We've achieved a lot of tremendous results, but we know that there's more work ahead of us than behind us, and we have a strong team to keep focused on that.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Minister Monsef. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Vashti.
This isn't about factions within caucus. This is about two strong individuals who saw something that was wrong and decided to stand up to it. So why does speaking truth to power disqualify you from sitting as a Liberal?
Being a member of a caucus comes with both rights and responsibilities, and part of that responsibility is around trust. I had extensive conversations with members of our caucus who informed me that they felt the trust was broken.
It's been nearly 24 hours since the Prime Minister announced to his caucus that Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott were out. It wasn't a caucus vote that cemented their fate, though. Justin Trudeau says he made the call after consulting with caucus chairs. He said based on those conversations, it was clear Wilson-Raybould and Philpott had lost the confidence of their Liberal colleagues. Did the Prime Minister follow the rules here, though? Michael Chong is an Ontario Conservative MP who sponsored the 2014 Reform Act, and he joins me here in studio. Hi, Mr. Chong. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming in. Let me just ask you to first lay out what your bill, which was passed, what are the rules under which Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott would be able to be kicked out? Like, how would that work?
So the first rule, which is the caucus expulsion rule, says that there's a two-step process. First, 20% of the caucus had to have written to the caucus chair requesting an expulsion vote. And then second, a majority of caucus, not just members present, but a majority of the entire caucus would have had to have voted on a secret ballot to expel in order for the expulsion to take place. So in the Liberal caucus, there had been 179 members. That meant that at least 36 Liberal members of Parliament would have had to have written to the caucus chair. Once he received at least 36 letters, he could then call a caucus, secret ballot vote in caucus on the expulsion of Ms. Wilson-Raybould and Ms. Philpott. If 90 members of that caucus voted to expel, then they would have been expelled. And if only 120 members showed up for that vote, you still require 90 members.
So there had to be a vote.
There had to be a vote, and it had to be an absolute majority of all members, not just members.
Okay, here's what the caucus chair said about that. That's not the way we do things in the National Liberal Caucus. We don't vote typically. We never opted into the rules that were suggested by the Conservative Private Members Bill by Michael Chong. We operate by convention, and our party's convention is that membership in caucus is determined by the leader of the party, informed by caucus, of course. So his assertion is that essentially an overwhelming majority of caucus did support this. That was conveyed to the Prime Minister, but ultimately the party and members of the party decided that the Prime Minister makes that decision.
Well, it's shocking to hear that from a sitting member of Parliament because it's a clear undermining of the rule of law. It doesn't matter who originally sponsored the bill, whether it was a Conservative MP that introduced a private member's bill or a Liberal MP. The bill became law. Parliament decided to adopt this bill into law. It became law, and it's the law of the land. And the law says that at the first caucus meeting of a caucus after a general election, 4 recorded votes are to take place, determining the power of the Prime Minister and the power of Liberal MPs. Those 4 recorded votes did not take place in direct contravention of the law. It is illegal, and it's a violation of the law.
Okay, let me flip it around a second, because didn't Andrew Scheer expel Senator Lynn Beyak from Conservative caucus without going through that whole process?
That's correct, but Lynn Beyak, these rules only apply to the House of Commons caucus.
So it doesn't matter if you're a senator?
It doesn't apply to senators. The rules in question here about the expulsion of a member concern only elected members of Parliament who sit in a House of Commons caucus.
So I remember when the discussion around Maxime Bernier was happening, for example. Was it Andrew Scheer's intention? Do you like was he going to follow all those rules if in fact he was going to? Was that commitment clearly made?
Absolutely. In fact, I can tell you that not a single member of the Conservative caucus has been expelled in this Parliament. Why? Because the Conservative caucus adopted that first rule at our first meeting on November 5th, 2015.
So there's no way Andrew Scheer would kick somebody out unless he had followed all those rules that your bill lays out.
That is correct. In other words, that is correct. The only way for a Conservative MP to be expelled from the Conservative caucus is for that two-step secret ballot process to take place.
Okay, the Liberals say that's not the way we want to do it. We're not going to opt in.
I'm sorry, in this country we have the rule of law. It's enshrined in the preamble of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the Constitution Act 1982. Parties don't get to pick and choose what laws they follow. This is how we got into this whole SNC-Lavalin mess in the first place. A flagrant dismissal of the rule of law. It is the law. It's in the Parliament of Canada Act. It's an act of Parliament, Section 49. They broke the law.
Okay, let me ask you on a broader scale, because your party has certainly been critical of the decision, not just to kick them out, but of what the Prime Minister has said on all of this. If a cabinet minister secretly recorded a conversation with the clerk of the Privy Council and made it public, don't you think if it was Prime Minister Andrew Scheer, he too would kick somebody out for that?
Well, clearly taping that conversation was inappropriate, but let's not get distracted by the heart of the issue here, which is that the independence of our prosecutorial function was violated. The Shawcross Doctrine was violated, and it was violated not just once, but multiple times during the fall. And I think the Attorney General... Has that
been concluded, though? I mean,
I've concluded that. I think it's quite clear. I think if you look at the testimony and the evidence, whether it's taped evidence, which maybe have gotten inappropriately, or it's written evidence, documentary evidence that's been submitted to the Justice Committee, it's clear that that line was crossed. If it hadn't been crossed in September, on September 17th, it certainly had been crossed by Christmas.
I mean, the Prime Minister insists, though, that they weren't crossing a line, that they were raising the issue of jobs appropriately so, and the evidence would seem to back up the fact I mean, they're not saying we want to do something illegal, right? They're saying, in fact, the opposite.
I think the important thing is this. The Shawcross Doctrine clearly states that it is okay for the Attorney General to solicit her cabinet minister colleagues' advice on a particular file, but it is not appropriate for those cabinet minister colleagues to put pressure on the Attorney General with respect to the case.
They just say they weren't putting pressure, though. They say they're just raising the issue.
I think there clearly was pressure, clearly.
Why do you think it's so clear?
Well, I've been in cabinet, and I know what it's like to get a phone call saying that the PM wants this done in a certain way in this town. That means, a huge amount of pressure is brought to bear. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And anybody...
Is that inherently wrong, though?
In this particular case, it was, because it violates the Shawcross Doctrine. And the issue here is that the unwritten Constitution, as the Supreme Court mentioned in its 1981 patriation reference, the unwritten Constitution is not justiciable in the court system. The only branch of our system that can adjudicate a breach of an unwritten constitutional convention like the Shawcross Doctrine is the legislative branch of our system, the House of Commons. But the House of Commons, to this point, being under the thumb and control of the PMO, has been unable and unwilling to bring this matter to a resolution.
What do you mean by a resolution?
Well, there's been no formal measure adopted of censure of the Prime Minister, no formal measure of reprimand to say the Prime Minister crossed a constitutional line.
But that hasn't been determined until, I mean, for example, the Ethics Commissioner won't say whether they crossed a constitutional line, but they will be able to weigh in on whether they broke the law in the conflict of interest law, and that has yet to be determined.
But I don't think the Ethics Commissioner has the legal jurisdiction to actually look at the heart of this issue, which is the violation of the judicial independence of our system, the violation of the Shawcross Doctrine.
I'm just saying, until that conclusion is drawn, how can you censor?
So first off, the Ethics Commissioner can only look at the Prime Minister furthering a private interest. He can't look at broader issues of the unwritten constitutional conventions that govern this country. The only place that can do that is the House of Commons and its committees. But those things are being controlled by the Prime Minister, as you see with these two caucus expulsions.
Well, they're dominated by the Liberals, under any government.
But they shouldn't be. And if you look at the United Kingdom, Theresa May has the Conservatives have a majority in the British House of Commons. But the British Conservative government is losing many votes on many issues.
Do we really want the model of stability in Britain, though, guiding the way?
Well, listen,
I mean,
democracy is messy business. And sometimes democracies are the most inefficient way to arrive at decisions. But in the long run, they will always take the best decisions possible. And so I always opt for a greater democratic system than centralized control.
Okay, I'm out of time. I have to leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Chong. I appreciate it.
Thank you.